So traditionally, the horror genre is not associated with the concept of fun, and, well, understandably so. Dealing with cosmic terrors or the very worst that the human experience has to offer does not lend itself to a good time. But every now and then, a horror movie will go out of its way to elicit a feeling of amusement from its frightened audience, like this lot. So with that in mind, I am Gareth, you are watching What Culture Horror, and here are fun horror movies you need to see. Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. This 2010 comedy horror feature stars Alan Tudyk and Tyler Labine as the titular hillbillies who get caught up in a series of increasingly bizarre, intense, and shocking events once they cross paths with a group of friends who are on a camping trip in West Virginia. The group's interaction with the well-intentioned pair is unfortunately clouded by a story told by Chad about the Memorial Day Massacre, a bloody event that involved a hillbilly attack 2 decades prior. Because of this, as well as the appearance and demeanor of the eponymous friends, the movie sees each member of the friend group dying off in gruesome but darkly humorous fashion. The film's strongest selling point is how it plays with genre conventions, specifically the idea of heroes and villains in slasher movies that take place in the countryside. It uses said conventions to lay the foundation for chuckle-inducing hijinks, whilst keeping the gore and fear in place to make an entertaining commentary on the pitfalls of making unhealthy assumptions about strangers based on surface-level interactions. Don't always judge a book by its cover and all that. Drag Me to Hell. Sam Raimi's Evil Dead series is a seminal example of a horror feature that nimbly balances terror and more whimsical elements to entertaining effect. And his 2009 return to the genre that made him a household name is no different, my friend. The plot follows Christine Brown, a loan officer whose decision to prove her cutthroat nature to her boss came back to bite her after she turns down a mortgage extension request from Sylvia Ganush, an elderly Romani woman. After consulting a fortune teller, Christine learns that she bears the curse of the Lamia, where she will endure immense pain and suffering for 3 days before being dragged to hell. Bummer. Naturally, Christine seeks to lift the curse, and this process ended up being far more complicated than she would have wanted, despite the tone confusing some who expected a more straightforward horror narrative. Drag Me to Hell has the hallmarks of Raimi's tonal sensibilities, and they were employed to great effect. It might eschew subtlety, but fortunately it keeps the tense scenes as such, and also throws in a healthy dose of absurd and gory laugh-out-loud moments. What more do you want? Braindead. From one filmmaking genius to another, this 1992 low-budget gore fest, also known as Dead Alive, heralded Middle-earth legend Peter Jackson's career in excessively gnarly fashion, alongside other dark comedies Bad Taste and Meet the Feebles. The plot follows Lionel, his domineering mother Vera, and the former's love interest, Paquita, as the trio get caught up in the beginning of a zombie outbreak. For starters, the feature is considered to be one of the goriest movies ever made, and with good reason. Despite having a relatively small budget of just $3 million, the motion picture's special effects are top tier, so much so that they earned Braindead its aforementioned honors. The humor is not left behind, however, as it is very clear throughout the story's runtime that none of this is meant to be taken too seriously. And this is reflected in Jackson's nutty directorial choices and the script that is chock full of off-kilter and memorable humor. Shopping Mall. The social, economic, and political changes that took place in the US in the 1980s inevitably showed their face in filmmaking, horror included. And one example of a representation of these changes is the 1986 indie horror feature Shopping Mall. Originally known as Killbots, the story follows a group of security robots turning evil and murdering employees in an American mall. One of a relatively few number of films in any genre to to benefit massively from test audience responses and a loss of nearly a quarter of its runtime, this motion picture trimmed off its excess footage in order to hone in on its kills, laughs, and most importantly, its commentary, a sharp reflection of its times. It explores the relationship between technology and consumerism, specifically the use of tech to suppress worker interests in favor of rampant profit-seeking. Despite these heady themes though, the movie does not take itself too seriously at all, and gives room for absurd humor to breathe and accentuate said themes. Lovely stuff. Re-Animator. Loosely based on H.P. Lovecraft's serial story, Herbert West, Re-Animator, this Stuart Gordon-helmed motion picture was one of the 1980s defining body horror entries, and a cult classic to boot. Following a medical student who develops a means to revive the dead, Re-Animator thrived on the requisite genre thrills, and said thrills were accompanied by a healthy side of deadpan humor. This 1985 picture places its attention on Herbert West, a medical student who has developed a substance that is capable of reviving dead bodies. He, alongside his classmate Dan Kane, attempt to use this on recently deceased people, and this put them at odds with one of their test subjects' colleagues, Dr. Carl Hill. Sure, it may have some unintentionally campy elements due to its time of production and release, but that does not matter in the face of a powerhouse performance from Jeffrey Combs, as well as its surreal and gruesome exploration of its subject matter. Deadstream. Deadstream is both amusing and chilling, and serves as an entertaining and largely well-deserved jab at content creators who engage in pointless public displays to divert attention away from their deplorable behavior. The Vanessa and Joseph Winter-directed effort follows Sean, also played by Joseph, a vlogger who attempts to redeem himself in the eyes of the public after one of his infamous stunts fails spectacularly. To do this, he intends to livestream his experience in Death Manor, an abandoned house long thought to be haunted. But once his biggest fan, Chrissy, unexpectedly enters the fray, things unsurprisingly take a horrible turn for the conceited internet personality. The vast majority of Deadstream is a massive fourth wall break. Once Sean addresses his fans on his live streams, with said fans responding in kind, viewers in the real world feel like they are his regular audience. And because of this, they get a first-hand experience of the thrills of being attacked by the spectre of Death Manor in a more immersive and visceral manner compared to a more traditionally filmed and structured horror movie. It's quite a time. Freaky! This 2020 play on the classic comedy Freaky Friday fortunately had more to offer than just being a simple riff. It does not explore the ramifications of body switching in extensive detail, but what it covers is sufficient enough to prop up the performances of its committed leads. The motion picture follows the Blissfield Butcher and Millie Kessler, a serial killer and high school student who unintentionally switch bodies after the former stabs the latter with an enchanted dagger called Ladelda. Unsurprisingly, the events that follow are chaotic, and because of their consequences, Millie has to stop the Butcher from ruining her life in an attempt to relive their glory days. Now, the story is nothing unique to write home about beyond its premise, but a knowingly cheeky tone, committed performances from Vince Vaughn and Catherine Newton, and quick pace makes it a fun and terrifying watch in equal measure. The People Under the Stairs. One of the horror genre's unassailable maestros, Wes Craven directed genre gems such as the early Scream movies and Nightmare on Elm Street, The Hills Have Eyes, and Red Eye. What a collection. But one effort of his that does not get enough attention compared to its deserving ilk is 1991's The People Under the Stairs, a hilarious horror feature that has a lot on its mind, and therefore a lot to say. The plot follows Poindexter Thule Williams, a young resident of a Los Angeles slum who is facing eviction alongside his family at the hands of the Robesons, a landlord couple who intend to sell Thule's home to gentrifiers. Understandably at his wit's end, compounded by his mother's need for surgery, Fool joins a burglary attempt in the Robesons' home alongside Leroy and Spencer, and terrifying events featuring cannibalism, home invasions, and a search for gold that ensue. Awash in gallows humor, The People Under the Stairs earns its laughs through the over-the-top nature of the Robesons, whose actors relish their cartoonishly evil personas, and the subtext that accompanies their characterizations. Craven's script also has multiple flashes of humor, with its characters often espousing absurd but still amusing pieces of dialogue to highlight the wild nature of this story. Get it watched if you haven't already, and continue your YouTube journey with What Culture Horror by tapping on another one of our frightening videos right here. Have a good day. See you soon.